I went all the way back to square one. No studio, no car, no nothing. Through all that, I still found ways around that to continue to keep doing what I'm doing.
This is the Bounce Back Generation podcast. We interview real people who tell us their stories of resilience, overcoming trauma, and discuss the science behind personal growth. Lil Rece is an LA-based hip-hop producer originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, working with artist Brent Faiyaz, among others. And Kelz is the creative force behind the YouTube channel Tales of a Black Girl. Today, we're exploring how to tell your story. If you are not in charge of creating your story about your own life, who is? Resilience is about taking your story of pain, troubles, and trauma and making it make sense to you. Part of that is owning your story so others can define you by your own interpretation of what has happened to you and where you're going in your own life. Lil Rece and Kelz, thank you for being here today. And before we hear about your story, I want to learn from you about what you think of when you think of storytelling. What does it mean to you to tell your story? Why is it important?
I think the storytelling is important because who better to tell your story than you? I feel like others listening to the story can learn from your story. Also, it's a therapy to get your story out there, to get it out of your mind and just out. There's a little more to it than that, but I'll just say that so far.
The importance of telling your own story is that you have control over your own story. You have control on what you want people to hear and what you want people to see. You go through your own experiences, you take lessons from those experiences, whether it's positive or trauma, and you can relay that wisdom, down the line, whether it's like generational, whether it's through friends, coworkers, but you can pass down that wisdom that you gain from your experience, exactly how you experienced it, rather than someone looking from the outside in. And you can just tell your own story. The most important thing is you telling your story. You know how it happened, and you can relay the information however you choose to.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to recognize is especially nowadays, if you want to hear who's telling your stories, go look at the news. The people on the news are telling stories about things they have no idea what they're talking about. So they're telling stories about a whole culture, about a whole society, about a whole group of people, and assuming that they know. And if you don't own that story, other people are going to run away with it. So I want to touch on something you just said, Lil Rece, about how telling your story is a form of therapy.
Yeah.
How has telling your story been therapeutic for you?
Yeah, for example, telling my story is not just something that's sitting in my head that I'm thinking about all day. I can't get out of there. I can't get it out verbally or whatever. So, getting it out, getting it to somebody is like I'm able to kind of have a weight lifted off my shoulder by being able to, talk about it and just get it out.
How do you can't just walk up to someone and say, let me tell you my story, right? How is it that you're finding the opportunities to talk about the things that have happened to you in a way that people are actually listening?
Well, it's more on the minor scale. You talk to your family, you talk to your friends, things like that. And even if you're telling somebody, what happened to you today, that's storytelling.
Right.
At the same time. So it's something that we do. It's something that I've been doing my whole life. So it's nothing different, now.
What about you, Kelz? Do you find that you have places and people that you can talk about your story where you get a receptive audience, people are listening and are respectful about it?
Yeah, so I tell my stories in different ways, multiple ways. I never, and this just comes natural to me, like I never just tell my full story, let's say on one platform. I put it across many platforms. And then if you really follow me, then if you put the pieces together, then you'll see a full story. But I tell my story, talking with family and friends that I absolutely trust with my emotions. So, and that's really big with me, is if I trust you with my emotional state of mind, then I'm as open as a book. I also tell my story like through my hairstyles that I get, like whatever I'm feeling reflects in my hairstyles, or like the way that I dress, or like my YouTube channel, Tales of a Black Girl, or my music that I do. I write poetry. So it just all depends on what I'm feeling and how I want to express my story.
That's great. That gets me to talking about how both of you are artists and you're using your creativity in order to tell your story. So I want to hear more about you, Lil Rece, and what your artistry is about. Can you talk about what you do?
Yeah. Currently, right now, I'm a producer, composer. I make beats. I've been doing that since middle school, but seriously since 2015 to current. And I was a visual painter at first, who I studied under my uncle Malik Sanefru. I've been doing art and drawing my whole life, and that was actually what I was doing before the music. Before 2015, I was like, you can see paintings. I was art shows and galleries. I was the youngest person in this open art studio at the time. I was 15 years old.
So what you both have talked about is so interesting. You don't always just need words to tell your story.
Yeah.
And you also don't need to have an immediate audience, because you can be telling your story by creating visual art. You could be telling your story by dressing a certain way and just walking down the street wearing what you're wearing, by creating music, by talking on YouTube and not just saying, here, I'm going to tell my story, but you're talking about things that are important to you. We can tell a story about ourselves by how our posture is. If you walk in the room and everyone's sitting around with their shoulders slumped, there's a story there that can be explored. What's happening? What's going on, right? So I think that's really interesting. Is there something in either of your art forms that you're using that we just talked about that has a particular message about what your life has been like? Or do you just kind of find something that's interesting at that moment and tell that story? Or is there a theme to your stories and your music and your art that you're making?
So to answer your question, for me, Tales of a Black Girl, that has a specific meaning and storytelling and a message that I want to get across. And basically it's about things that do not get talked about within my community. For example, like anxiety does not get talked about enough in the Black community. And if it does, it's like shunned. It's like, oh, you don't have anxiety, just suck it up, go on about your day, whatever the case may be. I want to break that down and say, like, it's okay for us to have anxiety, and you're not the only one who's experiencing these certain things that's happening within our community that doesn't get talked about.
Yeah, that's so important. What about you, Lil Rece?
All of my art, all of my music, I never went into it like, oh, I'm gonna do this or I'm gonna paint this. Everything is like how an artist can freestyle, a rapper can freestyle. I'm doing everything freestyle. My uncle taught me, the one who taught me to paint, just like how he push out all these hundreds of paintings still, and everything is vibrant and look different. He always told me to remain creative. So I feel like when I think too much about something, oh, this, that, and the third, that's when it doesn't flow right. So when I go into it and just let it flow, then I'm able to create easier. I'm able to express myself easier.
I want to say that that's what you just said about remain creative and like having that natural flow really resonated, because I've been having trouble with my YouTube trying to figure out topics ahead of time to,
Yeah.
to talk about. And I've been stuck. Like, I don't know what I want to talk about, but I know that when I get in front of the camera and, and just press record, something comes out. And then later I rewatch the video. I'm like, oh, wait, I like this video and the way that it just naturally came. And that's how I want my audience to view me, as authentic and just, just being myself. And that's another reason why I don't really edit down my videos either. I just give it raw footage.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's definitely way easier. It's like, even sometimes when people give me questions, I've been doing interviews and things of that nature since 2015 when I started doing music and it started taking off. So even still to this day, if somebody asks me a question in the moment, it can stop me instead of me just flowing and giving them what it is.
So we talked about the importance of owning your own story and the importance of being able to be creative around your story. And then what you guys are talking about now, which is the ability to be spontaneous about it. Let the story almost come out from you instead of trying to make it a certain thing. But I want to give you also both an opportunity to just tell who you are in a story. And I think of it this way, like if you were to go to heaven, right? And someone said, well, tell me about your life. What was it like? What would be your story? And I think the reason I ask that is because when we can look at our lives that way, we can almost see our lives like a myth, like mythology, like a heroic story. And that for us at Bounce Back Generation is this kind of trauma to resilience journey that we're all kind of on, that life is pretty damn traumatic. And it's there's so many unknowns, and they come from inside of us and outside of us, and all kinds of things come at us. And so storytelling is a way to kind of organize what is happening to us so that it makes sense to us, and basically gives our lives meaning. So we provide the meaning to the things that happen. So given that kind of context that I wanted to share, is there a way that you can say, okay, this is how I would describe my life if I were to be in heaven tomorrow and say, yeah, here's a story?
I would say my story is like a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs, and I'm terrified of roller coasters. I am super scared of heights. So there's ups and there's downs, but at the end of the day, at the end of the ride, I take my deep breath and say that it's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm okay. And so that's how I would say my life has been. I was born to my mother and my father. Shortly after I was born, they split up, and they haven't been on good terms since, and I'm a full-fledged adult. So navigating that space has had its ups and has its downs. But at the end of the day, like, I'm okay, and I'm dealing with the situation the best way that I know I can. In life, there's struggles. I've had my struggles, and I couldn't put a name to my struggle because I might have been too young or didn't have the correct knowledge on how to navigate through it. But here I am today. I'm an adult. I think I'm handling my life the best way I know can. I'm on the straight and narrow, and that's all that I can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, that's a resilience story, that you see the ups and downs. Instead of being in the wave, you're looking back at what happened. And then that helps you to think, okay, I'm going to go up, I'm going to have a cycle again, or I'm going to go up and then I'm going to go down. And I know that this is how life goes, and I'm going to manage it because I've been able to do it in the past. So I think that's a really empowering story. How about you, Lil Rece? How would you kind of characterize your life story?
I'm still on the path, but I came all the way from the bottom to being somewhere that nobody can even imagine possible coming out of our neighborhood. Long story short, it was definitely a roller coaster ride, like Shank said. Like, I think anybody who's been in urban communities and stuff, it hasn't always been the easiest ride. My mom, she has 5 kids. It's me and 4 other brothers, 1 older, 3 younger. Both my parents, so that's 7 people in the household. We struggled. We lived in the projects starting out. We not in the projects no more, but just never, just certain things just growing up that you wish that you would have had getting tapped on at school, but also I'm like the neighborhood superhero because everybody knows me and all my brothers can do backflips and acrobatics and this, that, and the third. So it'll be like anywhere I went, any school, any community, they always, hey, bro, hit a backflip. So it was like being a superhero because everybody couldn't do that. I was probably like one of the only two people on the block that can do that. But since my whole family can do stuff like that, then, we kind of was looked at like that. Then coming up when I got to middle school, that's when we moved out the project. So, life started progressing and getting better and things like that. 2012, I moved out my mom's house. I was gone until about 2017, came back for a year. I did what I needed to do. I got a deal. I moved to LA by myself. I started, being a responsible adult, came back and I brought it home, and I do it for my family. I do it for my community and ones that I love around me. So life is great right now. I would say that.
So that's a story that I want to hear because it's what I would term a success story. How do you do that? I mean, how old were you when you moved to LA and you said, okay, I want to go make music. I want to produce, I want to make beats and stuff. What did you do? Because that's a really almost impossible world to break into.
Wait, Lil Rece, before you answer that, I want to ask you a question. Yeah. Remember, we used to work at the Exploratorium together, and we were having a conversation. We was at work, and you asked me what was my advice on what you should do. Should you continue working at the Exploratorium, or should you just stop and go full-fledged doing music? Now, I just want to ask you, do you remember that conversation that we was having?
I definitely remember that conversation. I would just contemplating, thinking to myself, I don't know how life is going to turn out. If I quit my job, I'm already working here. I'm making sufficient money to sustain myself at the time. So that's a whole gray area that I'm jumping into, just jumping all the way into it. But it just got to a point where when I was coming to work, it was like I was taking off so much. And, Sylvia and Sal those was I would say the coolest supervisors I ever had. I come in, I tell them, even though they know hey, you have to be at work. I'm like, I'm going out of town because X, Y, and Z about the music. Is it cool? And they never told me no. You see how much I was taking off work. But it just got to a point where I'm like, there's no way that I can still work a job and all these people is hitting me to go out of town. I can't do both. So I just have to just come to the realization it's now or never because the stove is hot. I don't know if this is what I should do. For weeks, for months, I was thinking about this, and it was I feel like this is the right decision, and look where I'm at now.
So I want to hear how you broke into that industry, but I just want to make a point here about those decision points. A lot of times when we tell our stories, it's about okay, this and this and this was happening. And then one day I just decided I was going to go for it. Or I decided I was going to quit or whatever. And those are these huge moments where you just totally shift your direction. It's like taking another fork in the road, and it's so important.
Yeah.
So let's hear about how you actually broke into the music business, because that's a definite struggle to success story.
Yeah. Well, basically, so to start, nobody was even caring about, oh, bro, you make beats. Hey, let me send you some beats. Oh, thinking that my beats gonna be weak. Around that time, the internet wasn't really that big yet. It was people was on Instagram and stuff. It wasn't that big. So at that time, I hit up one of my homies that we used to go to school together. And I'm like, I see you doing your thing, rapping, and you pretty good. I'm like, let's throw something together. He all right, send me some beats. Sent them the beats. After that, he told me that his whole neighborhood was going crazy to them beats that I sent. After that day, after me and him put out that song, it was like the city was going crazy trying to figure out who is Lil Rece. Then I did another song. Now it's only 2 songs out. From that, then the Bay Area was like, who is Lil Rece? Then all these major artists from the Bay Area start tapping in with me. I Am Sue, Cool John, P-Lo, like, you know, every G-Eazy, all the people from San Francisco, Lil Yace, G-Val at the time, anybody who was hot at that time in the Bay Area was tapping in to get beats from me at that time.
So let's tell us the names of both those songs, and then we'll put them, if it's okay, we'll put the link to the YouTube videos that you have in the description so people can hear them. So what are those 2 songs that really just broke it out for you?
Lil Yace, Feds. That was
I was gonna say it was Feds.
Yeah, Feds. Then the second song I did, it was G Baby Gang.
So tell me where you are now in that process. What are you up to now?
You know, just collecting platinum and gold plaques at this point. Billboard magazines, 2 years in a row, things like that.
Well, congratulations. That's a fantastic story. And that's an inspiring story. What would you tell someone who said, look, I'm a teenager. I love making beats. It's something I want to do. What kind of advice would you give them?
The advice that I give them is it is not going to be overnight success. You have to stay honest if this is what you really want to do and go through with it all the way through the ups and downs. You have to sacrifice and make the commitment. That's just what you got to do to get where you're trying to go. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of young producers hit me up that's, you know, aspiring and things like that. And they'll get a little momentum going. And then when they feel like they not getting the reception that they want from everybody else and, oh, this is not popping off for me. But I just did 1 song or 2 songs. Like, you know, stay on it, be consistent. Like I said, through the ups and downs. 2017, for me, that whole year, I went all the way back to square one. No studio, no car, no nothing. And it's like, through all that, I still found ways around that to continue to keep doing what I'm doing. I was making beats at home at the time, right? On my mom's table. Every time I had to sell a beat or do anything, I had to book studio time at somebody else's studio, and I'm paying them a chunk out of what I'm making just to keep doing what I'm doing. So yeah, you gotta just can't give up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a don't give up story. Never give up, never give up, never give up. And those are some of my favorite stories, are when people just keep persevering, and then finally it all comes together. What about you, Shankel? Do you have like a success story, kind of the way you see because you're very successful at what you do? What's your success story?
I go back and forth with the word success because, you know, society has its version of what success looks like. The reality of what success is for me, it depends on the person and what they define as success. So my success story is that I am able to provide for myself through hard work, which means that I have my own apartment, I have my own car, and, you know, and I'm taking care of my everyday needs and wants by myself. I'm independent. And of course, you know, I'm not saying that I don't need help sometimes, or I may not struggle sometimes, or I may not have to sacrifice this to pay this, or whatever the case may be, but I'm independent and I'm basically doing what I want to do. Yeah, so that's my definition of success. And my success is I'm here in my own apartment, driving my own car. I can go wherever I want to, gas permitting, considering that the gas is $7 a gallon.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I'm able to do whatever I want to do.
So you got an independent story.
Yeah,
that's your not a success story, because you define the way you're defining success is independence.
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to be like that too. So I want to put this now together with what it is that Bounce Back Generation tries to help folks to understand about themselves. What's really important about storytelling, it's part of a package of tools that we like to share with people. And that's our 6 building blocks for resilience. So let me just walk through those. And I just want to kind of show how each building block fits together and how storytelling is the last one, and how it can, if you kind of put them all together, they kind of become this foundation with which you can build your life on. So the first building block is protection. And you might have a story about how you were not safe at some point in your life and you found protection. So you want to think about the reason why protection is number one is because it's the basis of how we function in life. If we're not safe, if we don't feel protected, that's where anxiety comes from. It's where we get our fight or flight feelings and freeze feelings. All those stress basically comes from not feeling safe. So number one is safety. Number two is relationships. And both of you have talked in your stories about relationships for good and bad and how they've supported you, or not. Or like Kelz, you said that the relationship between your mother and your father was a source of stress when you were growing up. But having strong relationships and having at least one person you can go to is a really important foundation that we all need. We call it our in case of emergency person, someone you can call up when you need something emotionally. The next thing is coping skills. So having coping skills that you can reach for, especially if you're feeling physically and emotionally upset. So things that you can reach for that are not going to make you feel bad the next day. So, we tend to reach for things like, drugs or alcohol or risky things that make us feel worse. So finding good coping skills that help us feel better. Next is belonging, feeling like you belong somewhere and to some group or to some, cause or something is really important. It's how we're built to be part of a group. And then finally is storytelling. So storytelling kind of puts everything together so that you can recognize for yourself whether you have those things in place or how those things, if not having those things, could have affected you. And that's where I want to come into the concept of trauma. And when you've had traumatic things happen in your life, how you tell the story about those traumatic things. Now, I'm not asking you to share necessarily a traumatic story that you have put into context, but just to share with the audience how you might put together a story after something really traumatic happened.
Well, I have a story. So to go back to the relationship building block, all my life, my mother and father have not been on good terms. And the one person that I had that was very neutral in that during that time was my aunt. And she's the one who helped raise me, all in a nutshell. And then she passed away in 2010. And so that was a very traumatic experience. She died from breast cancer. She had breast cancer. I actually watched her take her last breath. And I decided, in that moment, I decided that that's what I owed her, was to be there until her very last breath. And I did that. That day has changed me so much. And I didn't understand because I was a little bit younger and I wasn't as in tune with my feelings as I was, or understanding, what was going on. And so I was just angry all the time. I didn't know why I was angry. I was just really angry. And I didn't trust nobody, parents, grandparents, friends, close family. I didn't trust anybody. And I isolated myself for a very long time. And coming out of that situation, and I'm still addressing some of those feelings that I was feeling back then because I suppressed them for so long. It's been 12 years. It'll be 12 years in August. But I understand now why I'm so angry, and
What brought you to that understanding?
I wouldn't talk about her at all. So I didn't talk about her for the first couple of years that this happened. Anytime that she had got brought up, her name would get brought up, my body would tense up so bad, and I would just like disassociate with whatever it is going on around me. Mm-hmm. I would block it out. Now I'm able to talk about her, as you can see, and I still like my body still tenses up a little bit, but it's not like I'm a brick like how I was before. For me, getting past that was talking about her in good ways, how I felt, what she did for me, how important she is in the person I am today. Yeah, so just like talking about her.
What I think you're showing is something that's so important that, especially when we're young and things, but anytime something overwhelming happens to us, it's that thing where because you're in it, it's like you're the fish in water, you're the fish in the ocean. You don't know, you have absolutely no ability to kind of rise above and say, oh, I'm swimming right now in this really awful thing. And I have no objectivity. I don't have any way to kind of step outside myself and say, oh, look at what I'm going through.
And also with the pressure in the Black community of, you're strong, you can deal with it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. No, like I'm human, I have feelings, and I have bodily responses that I need to address and come to terms with. Yes, I am strong, but that doesn't determine how much I can take. Right.
I totally agree with you. I was just talking to my little homie last week, and he told me like all the stuff that he was going through, all type of. He like, bro, I can't even tell you the last time I cried, and I'm like, why? But and especially a Black man, it's like, bro, suck that shit up.
Yeah, and with a Black female, it's like you're this nurturer, so you have to take care of everybody around you. And then once you do that, then you can address yourself. And it's like, no, how can I take care of everyone if I can't take care of myself? If I'm not okay, how can I take care of the next person? Like that, to me, that's not giving my 100% full self. If I'm just like stuck here and I'm trying to help the next person.
Yeah. So what about you, Lil Rece? Do you have a way of approaching how you look at, your own traumatic stories, or do you have something you want to share in that way?
I feel like anybody who's living is like, we all go through trauma, and it's just recognizing it and being honest with yourself. My uncle, who I actually have tatted on my left hand, was literally my best friend. Like, he used to come over to my house every day just so we can play football and talk shit and do this, that, and the third. This is my mom's older brother. In 2013, he came down with congestive heart failure, the same thing that his mom, my grandmother, passed away from. It just took him straight out, like within like 3-4 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was quick and it was bad. Like, it used to really mess me. Like, even him just trying to talk and seeing how much he used to struggle just to talk because his heart is just getting bad. And I remember I was on my way to Antioch. Now, I don't even go visit people in the hospital. Something inside of me. I was on the freeway to get on the bridge. Something told me to go to that hospital. I went there. My mom and my cousin was there. He ended up passing away maybe about 2-3 hours after I got there. I was holding his left hand as he was taking his last breath. So I got his name tatted on my left hand. Just like I said, I feel like anybody who's living go through trauma, but it's just how you deal with it and move on from that. And I just be real and honest with myself, and I can come to peace with things when you just come to the reality about it that, this is life. Things happen. It hurts. I'm dealing with it, but life keep going on. It's like, as long as I have life in my body, I got to do it for me, my family, and the ones that aren't here, and the ones that are still here. So,
wow, it's interesting that both of you have stories of, aunt, uncle, and both of you have stories of being close to them and having this really meaningful relationship. And both of you have experienced them dying in your arms, basically.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Wow.
And that's why we're friends, son, Lil Rece.
Click.
That part. Hey, they remember people when we was at work, people used to think we was related.
Yes, because people say that we was at work that we looked alike. And so we started calling each other cousins.
And it's funny because I met Shank. I don't know what grade you was in, or you could have already been grown at the time. I'm talking about the safe haven that was at Jolie Gym. That was like what, 2004 or 3 or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like 2003. Yeah, because I was just going into high school. And this is what I was telling Jennifer too. I said, I met Lil Rece when I was a kid. And I was like, and he has stories about some things that I said, but I don't remember it. And when we reconnected in high school, because I used to coach one of his ex-girlfriends, we met again through that way. And then he approached me like, you don't remember me? Like, you don't remember you said this and this, and on this trip, we went to Disneyland together and everything. And I just don't remember. I didn't remember, and I still to this day don't remember, but I'm glad that we reconnected and we have this, friendship to where I can call and ask like, hey, Lil Rece, you want to be on this podcast? And he's like, yes, for sure.
Well, there you go. Sometimes other people share in our stories with us. And I think that's so important that we're going through life with other people, and they're characters in our story and we're characters in their story. But I also have to say, I have friends like that I've been friends with for a long time. And they'll say, remember that time you did? And I'm like, no, I did not do that. And it's like, yeah, you actually did. Normally at the end of the podcast, I always ask who made a difference for you in your life, but both of you have already told us in your story someone who made a big difference in your life. So I think you've covered that.
I got to give one more shout out before we get off here. Somebody making a big difference in my life. Brent Faiyaz, that's my brother. Ty Baston, that's his manager. Ty, man, he done been with me through thick and thin, everything. He done looked out for me, done changed my life, done changed my life to help my family and change their life.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about what he was able to do to
and
help?
tell her
my Bank of America account got 6 figures. Well, when you stay down through it all, and it just build up and it's cosmic.
Yeah, and Brent Faiyaz is an artist that is really breaking through right now.
Probably the biggest R&B singer of our time. Like,
he's really hot.
I feel really old right now. my son's 15, so if I know who any of this is, he's gonna stop listening to it because it's gonna be like tainted,
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Bounce Back Generation, you can find out more about us at bbgtv.org. And thank you to Jogging Turtle for our music.